So thanks for joining us, everyone. We worked out our fourth Teens Nation. Last year, we presented a Centre of Excellence approach, which we think actually links nicely in with our topic today. So today we're going to talk about your one-size-fits-all approach is already failing. You just might not know it yet.
No, got to use the mouse.
So hi everyone, my name is Megan Strant. I'm an organisational change consultant. I have a huge focus on learning in my role, as well as impact and preparation of employees across many organisations. I'm an independent consultant, MVP, and I've worked for many years with Lorraine in the same organisations. And actually, this is one of the first years that we're actually working differently.
I was just going to say that doesn't really flow nicely. You're an independent consultant. You've worked with me for many years. So why are you independent now?
We'll take that offline.
Yeah. No, we still actually do a lot of work together. So I'm Lorraine Strant. I have been an MVP for a little bit. And look, a lot of people who know me know that I live and breathe 365 and have been working with it since the BPOS days. My focus is actually around, the thing that I'm passionate about is around governance, which is where we fit in quite nicely together, because ultimately it comes down to, for me, governance is not about control, and we'll talk a bit more about that. It's about providing a stable, platform that people actually understand how to use, which is, nice segue into what we're talking about today.
I think some of our early sessions were on actually called the ideal making the marriage work between adoption and governance. So we've presented about that a lot. And actually these days, the only conference we present together is Teens Nation. So we'll continue to pitch our ideas until we run out of them, basically.
And it's funny enough, you never run out of them when it comes to governance and adoption.
We've got so much to talk about.
So to cover off, I guess, what we're going to be talking about today, now the title of this session is about failure, but realistically, we're actually going to be more optimistic and talk about success. So what is one size fits all, and what are we seeing as, I guess, consultants who have worked together and also don't work together? What is success with Microsoft Teams? And no, it's not going to be about go download this pack and away you go. But how do we actually measure success, as in really measure it? And what does this mean from a usage perspective? And how do we increase employee capability? So having them do more with the platform that they've got. And how do we actually measure this? So what is our capability framework, which is hopefully what you take away from this? How does this work for your people? So as I said, to begin with, what is one size fits all? So obviously it's pretty obvious, but what do we mean with one size fits all when it comes to Teams adoption, when it comes to governance, when it comes to 365, and what's wrong with the approach? What is wrong with it? It's been working for so many years for so many different people and organizations. So let's talk about what we see in clients. Now, the thing that I usually see, as I said, from a governance perspective, is untouched configurations. And what I mean by that is I look at their tenant settings and I see the defaults. I see just a singular policy for things. What I also see is IT ambivalence, because they've got more important things to do. Like they've got the multi-factor authentication project to roll out still, or their file migration to OneDrive or things like that. So details around Teams deployment and what features are available and what people can do is not that important to them. But the thing that they don't see, and we probably know a lot of IT people who are like this don't care about, is they don't see the user frustration. And that user frustration flows from like clicking something that doesn't do what they expect it to do through to their job, and it all adds up. Megan, what do you see?
So with a one-size-fits-all approach that I see across change management, a big thing that I see is in the learning space of the apps and the features. And many companies in the last few years in particular, and this was actually pre-pandemic as well, were starting to push self-service with the training, lighter touch programs, and as much as possible, utilising free content online that they can leverage from. I do find, though, it doesn't necessarily suit the organisation. So while there's some fantastic content online on maybe how to run meetings or how to collaborate, if it doesn't hit the mark with your organisation's, configuration, one-size-fits-all generic training content can actually really confuse people. So I've seen a bit of that as well, pushing out generic to utilise for their staff when maybe not appropriate and it doesn't suit. They also tend to generalise user groups. So maybe they'll be too narrow on, corporate knowledge worker and mobile.
Information worker.
Yeah. So a one-size-fits-all approach, I think it really lacks the connection to people and their job and their needs. And it can leave people lost and can actually really build negativity, because when you're frustrated, you're stressed with the tool because you're not quite knowing what you need to know, then you can get negative about that and resistant. So overall, we don't believe that a one-size-fits-all approach leads to success when it comes to Microsoft Teams. So let's take some time firstly to consider what success actually is. So this is something I know we've talked a lot about in the last 12 months, and there's probably been multiple blogs. And really that view, firstly, to consider, is it actually measured by usage or adoption? Is success high numbers across the features and the applications? Okay, so do you just look at usage, high use, yay, great? Or is it giving access to the apps? We don't really believe, or I don't, that just giving everyone everything leads to strong adoption. Some people think success is, and they enable as much as possible across the platform, and they think high usage and everything enabled is successful. Or they consider and think that it's about dollars spent, and enabling as much as possible and high usage is high ROI, or return on investment. Or could it be then, though, another way to look at success might be staff satisfaction, maybe along with reviewing how people are actually learning the tools, are they growing, and are they getting the most out of the tools? Could success be innovating process and enhancing how people work? So rather than just, yep, they use the thing, they're actually making it work for them and getting value out of it. And with this is the value that people get daily from the platform and using the applications, making an impact on their day and their job. What about you? I guess my comments are a lot to do with people learning usage. What about from your expertise, governance and platform?
Well, I guess the thing that I often see and we'll talk a little bit more about the usage and how this data is not necessarily what you think it might be, is, and we've seen it on projects when we have worked together, where the data is going in the wrong direction. And what does the wrong direction mean? Where where file creation in OneDrive is potentially exponentially high, but file creation in SharePoint is low because people are creating files in OneDrive as the default and sharing from there instead of being deliberate with their actions about where they put files. And that's the thing, is this is a combination of training and also the tooling and how you make it work. The thing as well is when IT departments or even those around the IT department look at what is success, is it a good, secure score? Is it a good productivity score? Honestly, is your manager going to go, we got 80% in the secure score, I'm going to give you a bonus? No, they're going to say the staff are really annoyed that they can't log in or they can't do this or this doesn't work. Fix it. So that's the thing, is we have to look at what is success and what do the scores actually mean to us, and what do we take from that? So as we said, is it about usage? Is it?
Well, sometimes when a project goes live, a success criteria will be, 80% of adoption. So to some people, they think, what, usage is success. But when you want to look deeper and long term, then not necessarily.
Excuse me. So let's actually, I talked about the data. So let's have a look at the measure, how the data that you actually have access to and how you measure it to analyze what's going on in your tenant, and how does that actually translate to success, or does it? So as we said, and we've said a number of times, there's going to be a common theme here, that success does not equal usage, or vice versa. Actually, usage does not equal success. So we've seen a lot of these kind of case studies, and these ones make me really laugh, because this is actually a Microsoft genuine case study, and kudos to the partners involved, kudos to the organization, kudos to Microsoft. But this organization in particular transitioned from Skype for Business. So naturally their Teams usage numbers are going to be high. Or people had to work from home due to COVID, so their usage numbers are high. It's like, yes, congratulations. We've stated the obvious. It was going to happen.
I'd have to say we did many, many projects together in 2020.
Oh my goodness.
Rapidly enabling organizations to move to Teams, like many people on this call who are consultants or out in the industry. And so that will be a common story at the start of the pandemic, huge surge in Teams usage.
And a lot of times organizations will stop there because, hey, look, we've got usage, it's successful, yay. But you know what? I'm sure we've come across people who say, I hate Teams. And you know what? They may have valid reasons for it.
And really what that is equating to is activation.
Exactly.
You logged into Teams and that's what
You
happened.
pressed a button, you used it. Now, we've actually wheeled out this particular graphic because it comes from a project that we actually both worked on, where, again, this was actually used in a Microsoft case study, and it was talking about how this particular organization had amazing success. They had something like, I think it was
84%
84% active users across an organization, a multinational, tens of thousands of users. And when we actually looked at the usage data, we went, no, 90, I think it was something like 94% of it was chat, pure chat. 3% was channel conversations, and 3% was meetings. So that's the thing, is the data that we get is not necessarily exactly what we're looking for, that shows, yeah, we're actually getting success out of this.
I'm going to be savvy with presenting Teams right now. And really the story here for us was this column, basically comparing it. So that was a really critical story with this client, as Laurie mentioned.
I'm going to be savvy here. And what you can't see is here, this thin line on top of all these is the other usage. I see your savviness. Moving on. So when we have a look at the usage data, and people see things from different places. So we've got admin center reports, or if you go into the Teams admin center itself. So one is the M365 admin center report. We've got the Teams admin center. It has also additional usage here. And you can see here, like virtual visits is a relatively new one that just got added, that connects bookings data to it. But the thing is, these are specific workloads. They're not always necessarily in sync. They don't necessarily show us what we want. So, one of the things that we do see, again, from a Teams usage data perspective, is something like the call quality dashboard. Or we can go into the Teams admin center, and we can actually see that Megan experienced poor quality because she was not using, a headset at the time. She was just using the microphone on her webcam. But that's it. Like, how do I know statistically Megan doesn't use the expensive headset that I purchased for her? She does, don't worry.
All the time.
So that's the thing, is, how do we see that statistically? So Megan's poor experience, or anybody's poor experience, we can look at it once, but then how do we look at it consistently and say that's why they're doing it? Or, yeah, they're consistently having poor internet problems. So again, we've got more data that we can get through the Microsoft 365 usage analytics that used to be known as the Power BI content adoption pack, or adoption content pack. That's been there for a number of years. And unfortunately, again, this just looks at Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Yammer, Teams, and Skype for Business. Now, the benefit of this one is that you don't have to have an admin role to access it. It's in Power BI. We can share it with non-technical people and people in the business. And in fact, if you want, you can actually access the data directly from Power BI and customize it yourself, but you're still working with the same set of data. So it's still pretty high level, and it's really just focusing on the workloads. And anybody who uses Teams and 365 knows that a lot of the content and the functionality is actually behind the scenes.
It's kind of a pretty shallow view too, isn't it? Because when I think about success criteria in projects, and the number of times I've been asked what percentage increase will we get, which is a question I hate because I can't confirm and guarantee human behavior. But it looks good. That's the thing with this, is when you go into these reports, you can get really great graphs, and it, to an extent, it's really, really quite great, like the way you can work with the data. But I think it's almost fools people, because they go in and think, oh, great, we've got all this amazing data. We can use this to track how people work and what's going on. But then unless you really know what you're doing, you're just not getting exactly what you need.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly, on this particular data, it was only, I think, in the last couple of months where Microsoft flicked the switch to actually set the data to be anonymized by default, whereas previously it was a switch you had to use. And someone was telling me about a client that they may or may not have spoken to. I have to anonymize this because I got in trouble for being slightly specific last time, where the client actually didn't even know that the data had been anonymized, which meant that they're actually going into it and looking at the reports and looking at that, because they would have noticed, hang on, where did my identification of people and groups go? So that's the thing, is, what does this data mean to people? Is it just the stats?
So the productivity score, now I feel like we're not criticizing everything Microsoft provide, because we've actually being the MVPs, met a lot of the teams, and the productivity score, I was on a booth in whatever city when they were rolling this out, and they do a wonderful job at pulling together stuff like this. What I love about the productivity score is it moves from the stats and the data to more of a story about how people are working. It makes assumptions and recommendations for learning. So I love that you can, for example, drill into meeting behavior and look at what is some of the behavior, what's happening in your organization, what are some assumptions about what people are doing, and then it will click and say, here are some shifts or links to learning. It's not perfect. It can be really great to use to dive deeper into the patterns of usage and to think about how people are working, and then also consider goals to drive further improvement. However, while it tries to be kind of industry related, it still is a bit one size fits all. They can't exactly tell what's going on in each company. So a lot of this data that we've seen, that we're showing you, is fantastic, but it's just, is it exactly the picture and everything that you need to know? Well, what's already available? One other thing that we looked at when we were actually preparing for this session was the maturity model of Microsoft 365, because I personally am always keen to plug gaps. I'm keen to go, let's add to things, not, recreate something that's already there. If you have the time and resources, a way to assess your organization and success with Microsoft 365 is to review the maturity model. It's free, it's available online, and it's a really deep, complex process, but no doubt highly valuable, thorough, and very useful. But we understand not everyone can do this. We're all busy, we're all stressed, busy, moving quickly. And so one of the things we want you to get out of our session today is we wanted to just keep it simpler and think about what could you have at your fingertips with less effort and time, but still add some value. And any approach you have needs to go beyond the numbers and the analysis. So it's also about business goals, remember? And at the center of everything I do and you do and all of this is people and the experience of staff, which is really key. Yes, an organization wants to be secure, compliant, manage their devices, MFA, all that technical stuff that I don't get into. But day to day, it's all about the experience of the people, and key to the success is their knowledge and their skills, how they work and their process. So a big area we think for success is actually your employee capability. We see, we think, and we actually see with a lot of clients that we work with, that a lot of organizations are actually focusing heavily on the tenant. And it's been interesting because 2020 was a year of get onto Teams now, if you weren't already. And it's almost like there's been a really serious period of a number of concerns around the platform. They're trying to focus on the tenant, governance, configuration, security, platform management, certainly a lot of companies that I work with. And the area that I find is slipping away with less budget and attention is employee capability. Organizations do training usually attached to a project, a go live or an implementation or a major change, but there's less focus in ongoing in helping build skills and knowledge generally across staff. I mean, for everyone on this call, how many of your organizations, I'd love to know, have actually rolled out further training on meetings in the last 6 months? Because you saw me use a pen before, present to teams, great features in there. If you knew more about present to teams, you could actually translate our slides into French or German right now if you wanted to at your end. So there's great features that are out there, but we find organizations are applying less budget and formal learning. Now, there has been obvious challenges with the pandemic. We know it can't be perfect, and a lot of companies are doing what they can, and people have been getting by. We just feel generally that there's been less of a focus on targeted learning. And that means that people lack the meaning and the context of these skills and tools in their job. So how are we seeing organizations address this? Well, a main solution that I have seen across many customers I've engaged with is LinkedIn Learning. So let's firstly have a look there and talk about that for a sec.
Now, LinkedIn Learning is actually a fantastic resource, not just because Microsoft owns it, but because it actually is a fantastic platform that even LinkedIn themselves acquired and is contributed to. There's a lot of fantastic content that I've said fantastic a few times that is created by the community. So there's plenty of content from our MVP peers, but also non-MVPs. There's amazing stuff on there. And so when I was when we were preparing for this, I did some research on this. Now, what I found is that there are 26 courses that come up when you search for Microsoft Teams that date back to 2018. Now, I'm not saying they're all that old, but saying that over a period of time, and as we know, Teams is 5 years old, this is actually quite good to see this stuff. Now, the thing is, what we found is one particular course was targeted at team owners. One particular course was targeted at project managers. One was targeted at the education industry, because if you haven't worked in education or used Teams in education, their version of Teams is slightly different. There's things that they can do that we in the commercial world can't, and actually there's things they also can't that we in the commercial world can. But also the thing that was a little bit alarming to me is that only 5 of the courses had been updated in 2022. Now, we're pretty early into 2022, it's barely been 3 months, but think of the roadmap. Think of how much stuff has changed to Teams or been added to Teams in 2022. So when people are looking at this content, is it actually already the most freshest and the showing the features that are there? Because maybe a button has moved already. So person's going to look at the content, and when they see the buttons not there, straight away they're questioning the value of that particular training module.
So just a quick tip, if you work in learning and training and build content, you might want to reach out to LinkedIn and see if they need a hand.
True. Now, beyond LinkedIn, there's obviously plenty of free and paid solutions out there. So some of the free content is Microsoft support and learning sites. There's the Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways platform that you can install into your own environment and then surface content from Microsoft or your own content or third-party content as well. Then there's plenty of YouTube and bloggers. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click here to get alerted, and including people like us, where we've done some YouTube videos, I guess. And then there's also paid solutions. So no disrespect to anybody who's not on this list. It's obviously quite a big one in the general world, but the ones that I've personally worked with is Nulia, Brainstorm, and IQ Online. Now, these ones are actually quite good, as others are, because you can tailor the content, but you're still dealing with somebody else's content that's not necessarily targeted to your environment and your people. You're just doing the best that you can.
A quick comment there as well. Some people might go, what about Viva? Now, we talked about this when we were putting together this slide. However, Viva as a platform or as, tools and things that you can use is fantastic, but we're not personally seeing a lot of organizations who have actually embedded Viva into their organization and using it as a learning platform yet. So while it's fantastic, it was sort of maybe not just yet as a solution.
Well, the other thing as well is that Viva is just a content platform. It itself is not actually giving you any new content from Viva. It's just surfacing content that already exists elsewhere. So, which is why we kept it out.
So when it comes to success, as we've mentioned, a key part of that is your people. I think I've said that 20 times now. People, 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 and how they use the tools, along with the support and the learning that you have available to them. So we drafted. Sorry, I got distracted by chat. We drafted a high level concept of a framework for this session. Now, this is not the only solution and what we think, has to be done. But when we prepare for Teams Nation, a thing that we like to do is think about what are we being asked about and what's going on in the industry and how can we maybe create something and what have we been doing that can help people. Why? Because we get asked about this all the time. Clients want to know how their organization is going and how to review next steps and what do they need to do to be stronger with the tools. So part of this is the people and how capable are your staff in working with the tools.
Sorry, I moved the mouse.
You did, you moved the mouse, and now I'm going to get it back over there. And Laurie needs to get a touchpad, it's much easier.
I've got a giant touchpad here.
So rather than one size fits all approach, reviewing the lower level and considering like what's relevant to your organization, your people and the roles is going to be much more effective. Essentially, consider the levels of skills that people need. What do they actually need to do during their day? And that is one of the key things to shift from a one size fits all to a more targeted support and content. Now, if you are in an organization where you think you get amazing targeted support, workshopping, personas, all this different stuff, then hat off to you. That is fantastic. Realistically, I personally, or in our consulting, we find it's major enterprises, global companies with lots of budget who are doing really great programs of work. But there's so many organizations in the middle who don't have the teams, don't have the budget, and have actually maybe made cuts to some of the key areas. So when we thought about this, instead of one size fits all, what would work for maybe a bit of a concept? Immediately what stood out was, well, different levels. You know, some people just need basic skills, intermediate versus advanced. And when you look at Microsoft Teams, there's definitely a spread of different complexity in some of the tools. So what we're going to take you through now is just a concept for some key areas of Microsoft 365. And we're going to look at meetings, communication, collaboration, personal management. So let's take a look at how you can review and apply levels across some of the skills for the daily activities that you do.
Lorraine should not always have on click as the first thing to start with our slides.
So the first area of capability of your employees that we want to look at is meetings. So let's have a look at how you can break out the skills in meetings and different categories.
Now, the thing with this is, and this kind of might seem simple, but when you actually start pulling at the thread, you realize, oh, actually, there's a lot of depth that can be applied to this. Is if you think meetings are more than just meetings, there's different categories and features. So if you think about it, when right now we are attending a meeting, so we had to join the right way. We didn't schedule it, but we are also presenting it, whereas Michael is doing the facilitation of this. So between the two of us, there's two sets of skills that we need for this meeting, and then Michael needs to have his own, and then you as participants need to have a set.
So just a quick moment to thank the Teams Nation team and Michael, who's doing a fantastic job, and all of the
Absolutely
moderators and producers and everything.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So if you think about, if you break those particular roles up, so think about yourself, and when you actually attend a meeting, there are different things that you need to do. So, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but obviously things like, which device am I going to use? I need to know, am I muted by default when I join the meeting? Because one of the jokes of COVID was that people would join a meeting and, oh, you're on mute. But, maybe people don't know that Teams by default will mute you if there are already people in the meeting. So they'll join, oh, but last time I joined, I was not muted. Obviously, the hands up thing, something that I'm slowly starting to realize I should do is putting my hand up when it's time to talk, reactions and those kind of things. So as I said, I'm not going to go through all these, because if you think about when scheduling, there's a whole bunch of different skills and knowledge you need to have for that to work, and presenting and facilitating, as we said, what Michael's doing. I think a lot of people would not necessarily know how to do. And in fact, early on in COVID, when we ran our M365 May conference, and we were using live meetings in Teams, and the amount of times that we had people who said, no, I'm not going to bother turning up for the speaker training. And then they would basically be messaging us going, I can't get in, it's not working. It's like, well, that's because it's a live event. It's different from a meeting.
Obviously, you're still a little bit sour about that experience.
Yeah,
it's been 2 years.
Well, this actually brought that topic up. So if we look at the experience here, right? So there's a lot to actually unpack when it comes to scheduling a meeting. Have a think about this. So for a lot of us, this is second nature. But for a lot of the people we work with, it's not. So first, let's have a think about you going to the calendar app inside of Teams. I'm not even considering Outlook right now. So firstly, Meet Now, obviously instant. We've got schedule a meeting, we've got webinar, we've got live event. And I'm pretty sure in most organizations, all of those are still enabled for everybody. So then we've got the meeting options. We've got a choice of meeting details. Who should I add? What's the title? Should they be able to forward? Do I need responses from people? Should it be in a channel? Should it be recurring? What's the duration? Do I need to add stuff into the agenda, like, OneNote or other notes and those kind of things? And especially now with hybrid meetings, that's even more complex. So, and that's let alone before I've even said, I'm going to look at the schedule assistant to see when people are free. So that's just before I've even sent the meeting invite. Once I've sent it, I've now got even more options to put in there. I've got whether I want breakout rooms, whether I want meeting notes to be in there. We've got all of a sudden, the other thing that we'll also have with this is the meeting options themselves. How many people don't actually know that this exists? And I'm not asking for you, I'm asking for our peers that we work with. So that's the thing, is with this, we don't just point and click when we want to send a meeting. If you want to do it effectively, what a successful meeting will look like is one that is actually deliberate. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by Megan drawing on my screen. So it's deliberate. It's think about, is this a presentation and do I want people to participate? So like this particular session, does Michael want you to all unmute your microphones and your video and start a dialogue with us, especially if someone's, dog is barking because a delivery driver's there? No. So those options are selected. The amount of meetings I join from a vendor where I could kick the presenter out because I've joined with presenter rights. This is the challenge, is people don't know of the settings and they don't consider it. I get that sometimes you're too busy, but the thing with this, and I guess what we're saying, is not just about train people on the options, but how many people need all of those options? And that's the point that we're going to go through with this framework, because not everybody needs to have access to everything. And it's not about security or control. It's just about overwhelming choice. So that's where we look at this breaking it down into what is a basic feature, what's an intermediate feature, what's an advanced feature. Is the average person attending a meeting going to need to know how to share the recording or to integrate OneNote? Because a lot of the people who are attending meetings only ever attend them. They don't actually schedule them.
And look, this isn't an exhaustive list of everything you need to know. It's an example to give you a way that we tend to look at, okay, you want to understand your capability or review it. Well, let's have a look at what people have as the tool into these areas to help you consider then what capability are you trying to drive? Is it that 80% of staff really is somewhere between basic and intermediate? Or there might be roles that are just basic because they just join meetings once a month and they're frontline, things like that.
And I've actually got to call out Damien in the chat thread, who actually has even raised something that I didn't even consider as this, is there are people who use just the web client and only ever use the web client, and their experience is different, or they use Mac or mobile. So that's things we have to think about, is what their experience is going to be and what their experience should be, because we do have some controls around that. I'll shut up now because I waffle.
So the next area is communication. So that was meetings. With communication, this is fairly, bit more straightforward. But what we wanted to show you as an example in how people communicate is the way we communicate in Microsoft Teams through chat and channels. So obviously you can communicate through calls and meetings, but just as an option here, when we thought about chat and channels as ways to communicate, having a think about what are some features or skills that people need. Now it's funny, we've got when to use chat. It's obviously not a technical skill, but it can actually be important there.
And you can disable it.
But there's some really great features like pinning chats, saving channel conversations, some things are straightforward. Well, remember back to when, Teams is 5 years old, when earlier on where it was really hard to get people to understand how to reply to a thread and not do a new message and have it all separate.
Also that you could only do it in a meeting chat and not a chat. That was fun.
So sorry, I'm probably talking about channels actually. But it's interesting that with channels, some things got easier, but some things still are complex. So creating tags, I can almost guarantee that many people on this call either don't know what tags are or have probably never used them because they may not have a need, but they can be really valuable. So there's different skills that come under the sort of communication in Microsoft Teams. So we thought we'd throw them in just as another example into the framework here. So when it comes to communication, so what we're doing with this framework, as you can get a feel for, is thinking about category capabilities and then using that to sort of break down things. And so you've got there some features across basic and intermediate, and I've got an error in my slide, sloppy. That row up the top of attenders from the previous one. But the chat and channels, so if you go down to there, you can see how we've sort of had a bit of a guess of what goes into basic versus immediate. So as I said, creating tags is definitely an intermediate skill. But even things like, as much as we can say some things are basic, I'm sure you can see that some people still struggle with things like an app mention, a reply and things. So it's worth thinking about what the skills are, but what is the benchmark and where do you want them to be in the capability in your organization? The other area that I want to touch on is collaboration. Now, complex area, definitely. Here's again a broad sweep of what we thought fell under collaboration just initially. So opening files, storing files, co-authoring, sharing apps. If you are highly technical and whatever you do on this call, I'm sure you can look at this and go, yeah. But you may forget that opening a file can be confusing. Browser, full client. I am still having that needing to educate on that when I go into some companies. Even moving it from the browser if it opens their default into the full app And then also saving. Okay, people just click save and where does it go? So there are these basic skills that need to be, that capability needs to be improved across many organizations. But you can see the range of skills there. So got this table right. So you can see there that I have put them in, and what's interesting with collaboration is barely anything is basic in my opinion. I really just put in there as editing text in a document. Hopefully a lot of people can do that. It's fairly, hopefully basic skill. But collaboration's a really great example, is if you want people to collaborate and you're struggling, well, these are actually quite complex skills in some ways. And so it's great to see between meetings versus collaboration. Okay, people will pick things up. Remember that one size fits all? They'll pick up what they pick up. But I doubt with a one size fits all approach and too generic or too light touch, you'll really get them thriving with their collaboration. The next area we had is personal management. So Lorian will explain what that means.
Yes. Now, personal management, the amount of times that people will say they're frustrated with the notifications in Teams, or there's too much stuff in their activity feeds. And that's the thing is, again, some of these things shouldn't be turned on for people. Some of these things can be set as a default. But again, not going to go into the detail of it, but there's a lot of choice here. So again, think about the amount of choices. And again, what we're talking about here is, by the way, when Megan disappears, she's checking the chat because there's an arm here. It looks weird to me, it must look weird to you. Is when we're talking about these, is not so much about turning things off just because we can, but potentially reducing the amount of overwhelming choice that people have. So I showed you what all the choices from a meeting perspective. Now let's look at again from the personal level. So for me, just to be a basic user, I should be able to manage pop-ups. Do I want it showing up, as a Windows pop-up, or do I want it showing up, as a Teams pop-up? Different choices, because different noises, different places to set notifications. Do I want to pop out a chat? Do I want to pop out my apps? Do I want everything showing up in the activity feed? One of the things that I see people don't do more often than not is disabling notifications of likes. So every time somebody likes their message, it will show up in their activity feed. So it becomes noise to them.
I have to say, when I did this table, I almost felt like the stuff I put in basic there was pretty generous. It probably should almost all be intermediate, because a lot of people haven't actually understood how their license sort of fits into their home machine and the operating system, and how you've got Windows notifications, Teams notifications.
Yeah.
So this area can actually be quite complex in managing your alerts and knowing what to do with them.
And the thing is, it also bleeds out outside of that, because again, people will get notifications for the daily synopsis of what conversations they missed in Teams. They don't know that it, how it works, that if you're away for an hour, then it will show up there. They don't necessarily know that. They just say, oh my God, I'm getting messages in Teams and in email. Can I not? So think about this again from the complexity that users have to go through. Oh, sorry, it's not PowerPoint. I can't click there. So first one, this new chat density feature. I don't know who's used it. I won't use it. It looks like just Slack or IRC. It's too much text for me. But again, like I've got a choice. Do I want, the comfy or the compact? Do I want to open chats in the main window or new window? File preferences, do I want it to default to opening in the browser or in the desktop app or within Teams? Think about then the notifications, as I said before, and this goes on and on because there's the notifications. Then this is my particular one where I've got it set to customized. Then there's all the ones for chat and meetings and calls and those notifications and your phone preferences. And this goes on and on and on. So this is exhausting. And look, not all of this can be customized for users, but if you think about all this stuff they have to go through, then there's all the other things on top of, and this is just the most basic. This is how do I use it? You know what the way to think about this? Getting in your car and adjusting the seat, the mirror, and the rear view mirror, and all those kind of things. That's what this is. People don't know how to do it, but I'm pretty sure they know how to do it when they get in the car. So think about everything else they need to do about their car as well.
Take a breath, Florian.
I don't know. You're on the soapbox. So I can't get off the soapbox.
I just wanted to mention, yes, I know that we've moved through some slides, but we knew that this would be recorded, uploaded, and you could go back and pause and just take what you will with any of the content. So we've shown you a bit of a concept on how you can review skills and review the overall organization capability and skills of your people. or skills required in the applications. But it's a little bit one size fits all because it's just skills in a way. There's levels. So how do you consider this across roles or locations, departments? I want to take a moment here just to mention personas. There was a dip in my consulting a couple of years ago where I felt personas was the most overused word, second to maybe the word adoption, only because a lot of organizations would always talk about personas, but not really understand what they needed or as in what to do with the content. Personas are great, but they're often done by large organizations with, a whole lot of different types of skill sets. I find though sometimes you can pay a lot of money to have consultants come in and do personas for you and create great visuals, but then nothing's done with it. And I've even had organizations where they've said, oh, we had some personas done, and I've asked, what did you do with them? And they went, well, we didn't really know what to do with them. So they can be great. And the needs of staff need to be used and understood for targeted learning. So it can actually help answer some questions. Personas can be also used for maybe targeted policies for teams functionality in TAC or governance and things like that. But there wasn't really time for personas when COVID rolled in and teams was just thrust onto staff. So all I wanted to touch on here was whatever works for you. If you know what to do with personas and you've developed them before, it can be a way to then do a deeper review. Just be careful of sort of generic one size fits all labels like individual contributor, knowledge worker, team member, or mobile worker. Like make sure that you think of really adding value. In my work personally, I actually would use a learning needs analysis probably in the place of a persona for a lot of my work. I slipped and drew on the slide. So if you wanted to now go deeper, so we've shown you, some great tables where the value we wanted to add there was you can go deeper and look at the apps and just think about basic versus intermediate and what are our goals? What's the capability we want in this organization? And you may just be able to stop there. But if you think you want to do a bit more work, then a learning needs analysis would be really great. Now, this is one tool that I have used before, just to show you can see here it's got business areas, you can put the skills down the side and work and do a bit of a matrix on who needs what or what level. Could be business area is basic or intermediate is required.
Is that career new?
And then this one, I literally just, I'm trying not to say Googled it. I went into a search engine and just put learning needs analysis. This image is actually just online. So you can get loads of free templates because I didn't want to use other project IP. But you can see in this one, they've got the roles down the side. You can put skills across the top and start to get a matrix and go further on who needs to know what. Why? Because it's an ongoing tool that you can go back to and think about really not just training people, supporting and reinforcing and really making sure those departments can do what they need to. So it's a great way to deep dive, if you like. Once you've thought about the key areas, skill levels and overall capability, you can consider doing this to drive learning. If you want to go deeper, you can, or you can just start with high level, the concept, the tables, and just start thinking about things like that.
Now, what about the governance? This is where I need Flanders' wife. When somebody think about the governance, where does governance come into it? We talked about control, and actually making settings and changes to do with matching with these personas and ensuring that our users aren't necessarily overwhelmed. So consider this. We use a standard operating environment for desktops. Yes, that's still a thing. We also use limited building access. So if somebody starts at a job, they get access to their office. We restrict who can create pages on the intranet site. Or who can send an email to the entire company. Now, you might be thinking, well, this is about locking things down. Yes, to a point, but it's also about reducing the potential for confusion by somebody ending up on the wrong floor of the building or accidentally sending an email out to the entire company that was potentially inappropriate, that they should have not actually done that. That was not rude, it just shouldn't have gone to that particular audience. Think about it this way as well, right? Stepping outside of Teams, because 365 existed outside of Teams. Think about how we might actually use Intune or group policies to deploy desktop settings to Windows PCs or Outlook signatures or OneDrive synchronization. Think about those things. We're not enforcing anything. We're simply assisting. We're making the experience better. Because think about the scenario where you would say, hey, Megan, welcome to your new job. So there's your computer, there's your username and password, and good luck.
It's a really good point too, because how many companies probably say, Like, I would love to see an organization that actually sits people down and says, okay, these are the tools that we use, but then more deeper into the how. And I'd love to then go sit down in a team, my new team or department, and talk to them about kind of the collaboration contract. How do you guys work together? You know, so as again, as I said, I know some people, it probably is amazing in your organization and that's great. But what we're trying to do here is, I guess, help and support those that have a lot of work to do.
Now, the thing as well is, as I said with this, is turning off features. And years ago, I was at an Ignite debate about turn it all on, turn it all off in 365. Turning off features has often been seen as a way to 5 minutes. Awesome. You just need 30 seconds out of that, yeah? Turning off features is often seen as a way of preventing access to things, or not giving people access because we don't want them to use it. And that's where personas kind of comes into, well, who should have access to what? And we're saying go further with that, because the thing with this is, as I've shown you in very small area, or a very small demonstration, how overwhelming Microsoft Teams can be. So let's reduce that down so that people are not continually overwhelmed and they get actually the most out of the platform, because like bumper bowling, they're directed into a particular path. So how do we actually apply that to governance? In most organizations, when I look at the policy settings that apply to users, I see this global org-wide default. In certain organizations, that might make sense, but in most, it doesn't. Now, the thing is that Teams policies are usually centered around who can create a team. That's an easy one, which is technically a group. And also what phone calls people can make, whether they can call international or mobile or long distance. Thank you. But the thing is, there's a lot more policies across the entire suite of Microsoft Teams. In fact, we've actually got more opportunity here than we do in any other area of 365 to create a better, more nurtured experience for end users. So we've got the ability of what templates can people use when they create a team, or who can create a private channel or a shared channel coming soon, and what can they do with that? What we've got, and I'm not going to go through all of these, is so many different policies that we can apply to a Teams experience. And the way to think about it is for those from the IT side of things. From a Windows perspective, we have tons of policies, and that's our operating system, and Teams is seen as the meta OS. And we've got the policies to back it up. So we've got all these policies that we can apply a more nurtured experience to end users. Now,
now, because we're going to quickly wrap up, but we couldn't finish without talking about new stuff coming down the pipe. Okay, so the things in the roadmap and new features. At the start of the call, I touched on, present in Teams. There are new things coming all the time. So we just wanted to mention, going back to the framework and the tables, is essentially just slot them in. If you do create a table and framework and think about your capability goals and what you want people to know, you can just slot them into the skills and think about, something comes down the pipe, this is intermediate. Now, if you didn't see our session last year, go and have a look at the recording as well. We talked about a center of excellence approach for the ongoing journey. And these all fit together really nicely, because the center of excellence is about the ongoing discussion and the people who need a seat at the table to continue to manage your platform and talk about all of this together. So I'd highly recommend that.
And that's the thing with these features coming down the line, you need to determine, should they be left on as the default or turned off? Do we have any control about it? So we can provide some guidance around that. Because the thing is with Microsoft Teams, it's so connected to the rest of the platform. Now, there's so many different components in there. You need to have a think about Bookings has features in Teams that Bookings doesn't have on its own, as an example. Or there's personal analytics for how you use Teams in Power BI that we don't have for how I use email. So we have to think about all these things that are coming down the line from the roadmap perspective and how they fit in, and go, what is the experience we want people to have? What levels of control do we have to be able to, as I keep saying, nurture that experience for them as opposed to control it? So that's the thing, is this is a very big platform, and yeah, as I said, Microsoft Teams has more controls than any other tool around that.
Now, just one quick question. If you go into a search engine and type in Microsoft Maturity Model, it will probably bring it up. So
the Microsoft Maturity Model, the Maturity Model for Microsoft 365 is actually all community created by a number of MVPs and non-MVPs. So you can actually find it on docs.microsoft.com, but do a search online and you will find it. So
that was our session. We know we've probably lost people, talked fast, presented a lot of stuff, but we wanted to take you on a journey to thinking about what is success, where are you at, what can you do to drive capability and just improve people's day and make things work better, and get value. So rate our session. Okay, here's the final information.
Don't forget to like, subscribe.
Feel free to ask a question and tag us in Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever, if you want to continue the conversation. But mostly, thank you for taking the time to dial in. There's a number of tracks happening at the same time, so appreciate you dialing in to listen to us rant for a bit about Microsoft 365. And again, thanks to the guys who organise this conference. They do an amazing job.
Thank you for this conference.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Was it 5,000 attendees they now have?
I don't know. I haven't seen since before, but yeah.